Round of applause for Bob Marley, the great. I mean, this is why I think, Bob Marley is one of the great artists and musicians of the 20th century. You would think that songs would just be about London Thumakda or something, but they can also be about revolution and fighting against slavery. I don't know if you got all the words, but I didn't पूरी लफ्ज़ मुझे भी पहले नहीं समझ आते थे. But if you think about the words, they're really quite amazing. He was stolen from Africa. He was brought to the Caribbean. So the Caribbean islands were where all the big plantations were. Bob Marley himself was from the Caribbean, Jamaica, obviously. Then he says Buffalo Soldier, and he says dreadlock Rasta. Now, you see that the Buffalo Soldiers are wearing these dreadlocks. Do you know what they are? What are these dreadlocks? I know Bob Marley used to wear them and he used to smoke a lot of weed. And so you're probably thinking, man, fashionable, I'm going to do the same. Get some dreadlocks and smoke some weed. But no, that's not what it's all about, actually. For them, it was a religious thing. Because, in fact, they traced themselves back to the Ethiopian king Haile Selassie, whom they thought of as being a great king of Africa, which was not conquered by European colonial rule. And one day they would go back to Africa, they would go back to their home, they would go back to Ethiopia, to the motherland, etc. That's called Black Zionism, returning to the promised land, and escape all this horrific, horrible slavery that they are in. It's its own product in that sense that it's sort of a Caribbean development out of the conditions of slavery. But it's tracing itself back to Ethiopia. It's not identical at all with what's going on in Ethiopia, which is, as you can imagine, a kingdom and an empire. But here, this is such a good question, actually. It's such a good question. Because here's the interesting thing about the way in which history, your circumstances, and ideas cross-sect with each other. Ethiopia is an empire, like any other empire. Haile Selassie is a great king, etc. And you can imagine he's got his own slaves and so on, right? And he's conquered many people and the rest of it, etc. In fact, within Ethiopia, he is considered divine. Okay, and the Rastafari also consider him divine. Okay? So in Ethiopia, he represents something quite different. In fact, there's a revolution in Ethiopia, a Marxist revolution in Ethiopia against the monarchy. Ke bahut ho gayi, vagara, vagara. But the people who are in these enslaved conditions, taken from Africa as they were, they look back to Africa in a very different light, and the conditions in their present almost change the way they see Africa itself and the past itself, and the way they connect to that. So in this particular context, that same idea takes on a very revolutionary and radical sort of dimension. The same thing we can see happens with the Khilafat movement. That the Khilafat is over there, it's this Usmani Khilafat, it's been around for centuries, etc. The Turks are fed up of the Usmani Khilafat. They're like, oh my God, when do we get rid of this Khilafat and modernize our state and so on and so forth. And what's going on in India is that the Muslims are saying, we want the Khilafat back. There's a huge bloody movement for the restoration of the Khilafat, but it's actually not about the Khilafat. It's about the Khilafat, but it's not. What am I saying? It's about getting rid of the British. That's a romanticized symbol. So that's the interesting thing about history. I'll give you another really interesting example. When the new Europeans, bourgeois, capitalists, and Renaissance, and all of these other people, they wanted to get rid of the monarchies that had been ruling, Europe for such a long time, the feudal monarchies. Who did they look back to as a model? Who did they look to as a model? Who did they anchor themselves in? They anchored themselves in the Roman Republic. The Roman Republic, which had slaves, which was, an empire itself. But they somehow in their imagination thought that was the heyday of European life. All the Enlightenment and Renaissance people were always looking to the Romans as the great, all the way up to the fascists, even the Nietzsche and proto-fascists and others. They were looking to the Romans as the great European civilization. Christianity ne tabah kar diya, empires ne tabah kar diya, royalty ne tabah kar diya. That was the sort of great slogan of that period. But you can't just use that connection and say, oh, see, this reactionary movement is harking back to the past or something of that sort. You have to understand that the past in our imagination also transforms itself given the circumstances of the present. है ना मजेदार बात? Okay, so now what is this war all about? It's the transition point from war capitalism to industrial capitalism. The conflict was so huge, firstly, it caused what's called the cotton famine. What was the cotton famine? Production just plummeted. Because of slave plantations, it plummeted. But what was the basis of this particular war? It was basically the North was industrial capitalist, the South was slave plantation capitalist. And dono hi capitalist. But this is the more advanced form of capitalism. That was a more backward form of capitalism. And America could not have progressed had it remained in that kind of plantation slave system. So after it was defeated, there was a cotton famine, no supply of cotton from the American South. Merchants tried to make up the fall in supply by developing new sources in India, Egypt and Brazil. Now here's the interesting thing. Egypt के अंदर भी बहुत बड़े level पे Muhammad Ali began to start these cotton plantations in Egypt, thinking we're going to industrialize, we're going to catch up with the West, etc., etc. Unfortunately, very soon they went into debt. The whole Egyptian currency went into debt. They got destroyed, etc. And then the British basically took over. पूरे Egypt को debt में डाल के they took over. Does that remind you of another country that you get into debt and then you get taken over? I don't know. Maybe Pakistan. But anyway, similar Brazil, वगैरह. So in other parts. Britain successfully compelled India's cotton farming population to produce enough raw cotton for export to supply Europe's burgeoning system of mills, etc. But now the thing is, in India, they could not socially re-engineer cotton production in the same way as they could in the American South. In the American South, वो गुलाम था ना, उसका ये वाजू दवा के जो मर्जी कर ले. इंडिया के अंदर भी गुलाम ही थे हम, मगर फिर भी 1857 में रिवोल्ट हो गया, इधर रिवोल्ट हो गया, उधर रिवोल्ट हो गया, लड़ रहे थे लोग. So they were also a bit scared कि if we do too much to the Indians, तो ये इकट्ठे होके हमारे खिलाफ लड़ लेंगे. खास तौर पे 1857 had definitely proven that these people can fight back. So we better be a little more wary. So it was very difficult to do what they were doing, but they still tried to do it. And this came at the expense of Indian farmers' food crops. Now they moved millions of people from producing food to producing cotton, and millions would starve in the late 19th century and earlier 20th century as a result. I'll just show you some statistics here. In the US, sharecropping and later wage labor emerged after the Civil War. The Ku Klux Klan emerged to keep blacks enslaved. These were often former Confederate soldiers and so on. And freed black people, what did they want? What they wanted was that now that they were free, thanks to Lincoln, they said, we're going to get our own plot of land and we'll be independent farmers. Saab, do you think that happened? It never happened. It never happened. And at first they had to go back to being they became sharecroppers. And after that they just became wage laborers. And so the problem of racism in that way continued, because although they were no longer slaves, economically speaking, their condition of life had not improved significantly. Although socially and politically, they were now free. So, yes. Sharecropping का मतलब ये है कि I have a piece of land and I am going to give it to you to crop, and then I will take 50% share out of the crop that you produce. That's what sharecropping is. No, ownership मेरी है, फार्म मेरा है, मगर मैंने आपको हिस्सा दिया हुआ है, हिस्सा बटाई दिया हुआ है कि आपने उसको क्रॉप करना है, आपने उसको फार्म करना है, आपने जो करना है आपने करना है. मैं उस पर कंडीशंस लगा दूंगा कि you have to make sure you do this. That's the condition. Now you farm it, you take care of it, and then when it's done, you do all the work. Because I'm just the owner, I get 50%. Cool. कोई काम भी नहीं किया. अच्छा, पाकिस्तान में बहुत शेयर क्रॉपिंग है, by the way. I've done a whole study. My own thesis, PhD, was on the class structure of Pakistan, where I examined what's happening with sharecropping across Pakistan, etc. So finally, wage labor. Cotton production rebounded to many times the pre-war level by about 1880, 1890. It did rebound, etc. And it was the blacks again doing most of the work. But now there were also whites who were doing the work, and so on and so forth. And this finally accelerated the industrialization of the United States of America. इसके बगैर होनी नहीं थी industrialization America की. Here are two things that I wanted to point out to you. What was going on in India? So approximately, here's a staggering figure for you. 15 million people died between 1850 and 1899 in 24 major famines in India. And do you think the British were saying, "Hi, bichare Indians, inko kuch de do, No, they were like, produce the cotton, send it to the mill. We don't care how many people starve. This is free trade. This is what was going on. Here you can see an article on BBC, how British let 1 million Indians die in a famine and didn't really provide any relief. Let me also show you some really cool websites here that look at the Indian famine. This is the Orissa famine. They look at, there's a timeline of famines down here, you can see. And here is the Raja Putana famine, which was in 1869, etc. Here is then another famine, the Bihar famine, right? Here is another famine, the Great Famine, called the Great Famine. So all these famines were going on, millions of people devastated. Here is another very interesting website. This is called Mending the Lesson, and he's saying this is Bengal, etc. He's taking away the cotton, etc., or food or whatever it is. And over here in the small print, it says, the political economy is speaking, and it says, take care, my dear John, don't interfere with the laws of supply and demand. आजकल भी ऐसे ही इकोनॉमिस्ट कह रहे हैं, सप्लाई एंड डिमांड से मैच ना करना, चाहे मिलियंस मर जाएं, सानू नहीं परवाह. Here are some really amazing images, posters, pictures of the famine and various famines in India and what it did to the people, how it devastated those societies.
intentionally किया जाता था.
IMF जो हमारे साथ कर रहा है वो intentionally कर रहा है. You know, so it's not like they're saying, hello, we're going to starve 15 million people. It's not like that. But they're like, no, supply and demand. We need the cotton, we're buying the cotton, you produce the cotton, that's that. And you just have, the problem with you people is that you are just overpopulated. बंदे कम कर दो तो ये इतने सारे लोग नहीं मरेंगे. We're not overpopulated, we're just not producing for our own people. We're producing for those mills, etc. We're not producing for our own people, and that's why millions of people are dying. And what do the Malthusian economists tell us? You're overpopulated. क्या कहते हैं उसको? Birth control and not birth control, population control करो वगैरह, right? Through birth control, obviously. Family planning करो. Too many people, that's the problem, right? Yes.
सर कोई तो फैक्टर होगा कि एकदम से 15 मिलियन पीपल डाइड.
यही फैक्टर था ना, सारी फूड प्रोडक्शन डाइवर्ट हो गई, सारी लेबर डाइवर्ट हो गई, सारी ज़मीनें जो हैं जहाँ पे पहले खाना बनता था वहाँ पे अब कॉटन बननी शुरू हो गई, तो खाना बना ही नहीं, खाना कम था. अब जब थोड़ी सी डिप आया मानसून में या थोड़ी सी ड्राउट आई तो जितनी प्रोडक्शन थी वो वल्नरेबल थी, तो वो पैदावार ही नहीं हुई. जब पैदावार ही नहीं हुई, मिलियंस स्टार्टेड स्टार्विंग, देयर वाज नो रिजर्व्स एट ऑल. पहले तो कम से कम ये था, जो पुराना सिस्टम था, इंडिया का अपना सिस्टम था, उसमें कोई वो सोच समझ के कहते थे कोई रिजर्व्स रखने हैं. कभी कभार नहीं भी कपास कह रहा हूँ सॉरी, कभी कभार गंदम नहीं भी सही उग पाती और फैमिन्स होती हैं, सब जानते हैं इस बात को, तो रिलीफ वगैरह ऑर्गेनाइज होती थी. ब्रिटिश डिडंट केयर अबाउट दैट. They just, it's not their country, they don't care if millions starve, they're just like Indians, they're Indians. They're just like this as a people. They've had famines for their entire life. They're a barbaric sort of backward people and they're overpopulated. What can we do about it? We're doing the best we can. Trust me, I'll drink my tea and after my tea, I'll do the best that I can. But they were not doing anything. They were taking cotton out of India. They were not providing any kind of relief. आज भी ऐसे ही है यार. मतलब मैं आपसे क्या झूठ बोलूं, आज भी ऐसे ही है. किसी को वेस्ट में किसी को वहां पे रूलर्स वगैरह को परवाह है कि पाकिस्तान के अंदर 30% इन्फ्लेशन है. अभी आज सुबह की खबर है दोस्तों कि हुकूमत पाकिस्तान ने कहा कि मई बाप, जो IMF ने कहा सारी शराइत कबूल हैं. अब इमरान खान ने सडनली वोकन अप एंड सेड, है सारी शराइत कबूल है, देखो तुम IMF की गुलामी कर रहे हो. जब इमरान खान खुद कर रहा था उस वक्त तो उसको नहीं ख्याल था इस बात का, मगर बहरहाल है तुम IMF की गुलामी कर रहे हो. उन्होंने कहा सारी शराइत कबूल कर ली है, प्लीज रीडू इट. व्हाट इज द शराइत? Anybody tell me? What are the sharait? Yes.
Energy subsidies to bare minimum, energy prices.
Exactly. Energy subsidy हटाओ, डॉलर को जो कम गिराया हुआ है इसको भी चढ़ाओ. क्या होगा जब डॉलर को चढ़ेगा और क्या होगा जब एनर्जी सब्सिडी खत्म हो जाएगी? तो पेट्रोल डीजल वगैरह की कीमतें यूं ऊपर जाएंगी. जब पेट्रोल डीजल की कीमतें ऊपर जाएंगी तो इसको क्या होगा? 65% बिजली पाकिस्तान के अंदर पेट्रोल डीजल वगैरह से बनती है, पेट्रोल से नहीं डीजल और ऑयल वगैरह से बनती है. इसके अंदर भी उतने ही गुना इजाफा होगा. जब इसमें इजाफा होगा तो साथ ही ट्रांसपोर्ट में भी इजाफा होगा जिसमें डीजल डलता है गाड़ी में वगैरह, और उससे क्या होगा? ट्रांसपोर्ट भी महंगा होगा, बिजली भी महंगी होगी, तो आपकी सारी कमोडिटीज की प्राइसेस को क्या होगा? ऊपर जाएंगी. जब कमोडिटी की प्राइसेस ऊपर जाएंगी, टमाटर जो है वो 1000 रुपए का मिलेगा, तो बंदों का क्या होगा? लोगों का क्या होगा? पीपल विल स्टार्व. People will not be able to pay. Already in the last 3-4 months, I think people have lost like 30% of their incomes. अगर आप उनसे 50% इनकम गरीबों से छीन लें, 50% उनकी इनकम, तो व्हाट डू यू थिंक उनके पास बड़े बैंक रिजर्व्स पड़े हुए हैं? मैं तो अपने पुत्र को हार्वर्ड भेजने का सोच रहा हूँ. नहीं, उनके पास रिजर्व्स ही कोई नहीं है. उनके पास अगले दिन के लिए खाने के लिए नहीं कुछ है. तो what will happen? Starvation. People will come begging on the street. They'll knock on your window. They'll say, खुदा के वास्ते 10 रुपए दे दो. You know, that's what will happen. And that is what is happening. Here are some more images of the same thing. Thank you, supply and demand. You are so wonderful. Just leave millions of people starving underneath trees and so on. Thank you.
ब्रिटिश को इन कामों में मजा भी आता था. I think like वो Sepoy movement जो था, like they did it intentionally, like to hurt the sentiments of the people. Like, greasing, you know, maybe they wanted like to people, they could like provide the revenue they were generating, but since they were a colony, like, who cares, right?
Yeah. There were some people who did care. I don't say that every British person was like that. The British public in the West didn't really know what was going on, right? I'm sure if they knew actually what was going on, they would also be like, what the hell are you doing, right? And the colonists over here themselves, there were also some people who were like, this is horrific what we are doing. But the majority of them were making too much money to care. See, when you're making money, you don't care if millions starve, because you're making money. You're like, the world is... And then you make this theory. You know, the world is just selfish. Human nature is just to be selfish. Everybody's selfish. So the starving person here, they're also selfish. If I have all this money and I can give them and save them from starvation, and I'm not giving them... What is the difference between me and them? They're also selfish. I'm also selfish. Big deal. If they were in my place, they wouldn't have given me the money. So I don't have to give them anything. I don't have to give them relief. So this whole theory and idea that human nature is selfish is actually just a justification for holding on to the incredible wealth that you have accumulated at the expense of these huge populations of people, the mass of humanity. All right, so now what began to happen in the West itself is the labor movement started to get organized. All these people in the industries, etc., who were being worked to death, they started to get organized, and they started to talk about socialism and labor rights and so on. Socialism basically is the movement of the European working class. As the workers became more and more organized, they're like, you know what we're going to do? You know what we're going to do, governor? This is how they'd probably say it. You know what we're going to do, governor? We're going to run these factories ourselves. We're going to kick out these bosses and run these... Sorry, terrible accent. But you get the idea, governor. They're going to run the factories themselves. Right? That's what they wanted. That's what the European socialists wanted. So now... as they began to fight, and man, they fought hard, okay? They fought really, really hard. They got more and more organized, and fought harder and harder. Millions of people started to join these socialist parties in Germany and Russia and Austro-Hungary and, everywhere, France, etc. And as they got more and more organized, they could win more and more rights. In 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution happened. The socialists came to power. At the same time, the socialists also came to power in Germany, in Hungary, etc. वहाँ से उनकी हुकूमतें किसी ना किसी तरह गिरा दी. Russia में भी गिराने की कोशिश की, वहाँ पे नहीं गिरी, वगैरह. So now they got really terrified what's going on. So they had to start now making concessions. They also, of course, then unleashed fascism to destroy the European working class movement, the labor movement, etc. And that wasn't successful. I mean, it was successful in certain parts. They destroyed the Spanish Republic. You know what that is? So in Spain, there was a monarchy. They fought against it, and they created a republic, and all the leftists were united in that republic, and all the European monarchies got together, and the fascists got together, and they tried to smash that republic, and they sent Franco in to smash that republic, and Franco, did do that, etc. You've seen that movie where Lord of the Rings, where Gandalf stands and अपना staff ठक करके लगाता है, कहता है, you shall not pass, right? So that in Spanish is no pasarán, which basically means you shall not pass. And that was uttered by the great revolutionary of the Spanish, Communist Party, etc. It became a big slogan. Her name was Dolores. So as the European working class movement began, and as they smashed fascism, the capitalists had to make major, major concessions to the workers' movement, had to give them rights. Oh my God, those horrible things that you have to give to working people, poor people, rights and better working conditions and old age benefit and oh my God, national health insurance and national health schemes banani padi or free इलाज भी दें अब हम और फ्री एजुकेशन भी दें, पहले लम्स में बच्चा पढ़ता था, अब बेचारा जो है उसको गवर्नमेंट कॉलेज में पढ़ना पड़ेगा वगैरह वगैरह, सारी इतनी सारी कंसेशंस जो है करनी पड़ी फॉर द पुअर। तो उससे क्या हुआ कि प्राइस ऑफ लेबर स्टार्टेड टू गो अप। नाउ द कैपिटलिस्ट थॉट, why do this? Why should I invest my factory over here? I'm going to take my factory and put it in Bangladesh. I'm going to take my factory and put it somewhere in South America because I can get cheaper stuff there. So also, of course, there was the anti-colonial movement going on, but let me finish the lecture. We're also running out of time. So a new division of labor now emerges in the 20th century. China and India once again emerge as the leading cotton producers. Okay, they become now cotton producers. Now cotton production is not occurring in Europe. 200, 300 years cotton production is occurring. From 1780 onwards, cotton production is occurring in Europe. Now they say, send it all to the third world. Now the cotton production is occurring in the in the third world. And what happens in the first world is they maintain control. They don't need to maintain control of the production. They can just maintain, this comes back to your question, they can just maintain control of the retail. So the big companies today that are selling all the flashy, cool clothes are basically retailers. Walmart, Zara, Gap, Outfitters, etc. These companies amass huge profits by dominating commodity chains and selling inexpensive consumer goods manufactured by underpaid and overworked laborers concentrated mostly in Asia. Here is something that you can relate to if you can recognize these brands. Here's Zara. That is Uniqlo, I don't know, that is Tommy Hilfiger, H&M, Gap, Next, Outfitters. These are the top retailers in the world. हंस रही हैं आपके पास, आप सोच रही हैं अच्छा मेरे पास इसमें से कितने हैं? It's okay, it's okay. It's just a joke, don't. We're all part of it. We're all part of it. I'm part of it, you're part of it. We're all part of this world. It's how the world works. But I'm just not going to tell you the way the world works in such a way as to make you feel better or make myself feel better. I want to be honest about the way the world works, okay? So whereas the textile exports by country, China is leading the path, then there's EU, India, etc. And here is our beloved Pakistan over here. ठीक है? Not too bad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9th position. We used to be at 7th at one time. So Vietnam वगैरह वो आगे निकले. Chinese Taipei, by the way, is Taiwan, etc. Right? So, and what are the big companies? You might not be able to read it. Here is the name of the actual company, Inditex. And you know it as Zara, and then you have H&M, and then you have fast retailing, which is actually Uniqlo and Gap over here. And I can't read that, PWN, I think. Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger, and Next. And I can't read that either. American something. Outfitters, thank you. And Ralph Lauren, and God knows what that is. Anyway, you get the picture, right? And the biggest right now is Zara, although it keeps going back and forth. I looked at the graphs. Last year it was, I think, something else. And this year, you know, this is 2021. This year I think they've slipped back again. I don't know what it is. But you get the picture, right? These are the big companies. And I'm sure you all are quite fond of it. जब आप Oxford Street जाते होंगे तो ज़रूर कोई ना कोई एक चीज़ लेके आते होंगे, right? So finally, up with apologies to my friend here who thought he was going to get a break pretty soon, who fell for, you know, my infamous, you know, false promises. So what are some of the main arguments here? Firstly, the role of the state is key in this entire process. If you actually read the book and not just listen to my presentation, you see that at every step he tells you what was the role of the state in facilitating this, in facilitating that, in making this happen and making that happen. This global great transformation was not a spontaneous outcome of just pure market forces. It was accomplished by powerful Western states at every stage of the process. The second question that it kind of tries to address is, why did this happen in England? मैंने Europe लिख दिया, but more accurately in England and not any other place. Eastern Europe में तो ये नहीं हुआ, Central Europe में तो ये नहीं हुआ. Why did it happen where it happened? So he says many parts of the non-European world had the prerequisites for an industrial revolution. I mean, if you think about it, England would probably be the last place where it should happen because they don't grow cotton. It would probably, cotton revolution and industrial revolution should probably happen in the place that actually grows cotton, right? But yet it happens so far away. Why? So the answer is the missing element was state capacity and support. It was destroyed further by European war capitalism. So the key factor in the rise of the Industrial Revolution, where it happened, actually has to do with the way in which the state facilitated it rather than vice versa. Very, very important point. And now you have what he calls free trade imperialism. Once these countries were in the lead, Western colonial powers imposed a free trade imperialism, thus foreclosing any possibility of infant industry protection. Now they tell us, no, don't raise your tariff barriers, don't mess with the dollar price, etc. Let the market, free market determine what is determining, etc., etc. ये किसके लिए हैं सारी बातें? Import competition did not spur colonial industries to merchandise and compete with foreign products. They keep telling us, okay, oh, your industries are non-competitive, and if you open up the economy, then competition will force your industrialists and your industries to become competitive. But that's not what's ever happened. What's happened, my friends, and let me tell you this bluntly, is that when you open up your market, your industry cannot compete, it just gets destroyed. You know what happens in a competition? If you go, what's her name? Huh? Rida. Rida is like, she's like watching a show. She's like, this guy's nuts, man. What's he on? Must be some of that cocaine. Anyway, Rida, if you were in a boxing match, that's also a competition. You could win that competition, but if you lose badly because the other guy is a 6'5" gorilla, right, and he beats up his opponent, you'll be destroyed, correct? That's what's going on with the industries as well. When Pakistan opens up its industries, it's not like the capitalists say, oh, I love a good challenge. What was that thing? Challenge accepted, right? It's not like they can say that and say, yeah, I'm going to beat Uniqlo, just watch. I'm going to beat Gap. I'm going to make an industry that's bigger than Zara. No, that's not what's going on. They're like, man, I can't compete with this. They're producing much cheaper than I'm producing. They're producing faster, etc., etc. I'm going out of business. I don't have the ability. I don't have the technology. I don't have the capital. I don't have the state support. बिजली है कोई नहीं. मैं कैसे compete करूँ? Tax ऊपर से bureaucrat आ जाता है. ये हो जाता है, वो हो जाता है. Ease of doing जो भी. I know they have 1,000 different complaints, but the point is, they don't end up competing. They just end up getting destroyed. So nascent capitalist development is actively undermined by advanced capitalist states so that production can be catered to Western markets. Hamari societies are being broken down so that production can occur in a way that benefits the big bosses today. The result is a new international division of labor, which I've spoken about. That's it for today.